And I think what's important is some of the insights around shared services and the trends that exist. From an evolution standpoint, clearly savings are made from shared services are sustainable. And I think from our research, our global best practices study that we did in 2011 and 2012, 34% of the respondents actually indicated they deliver a year-over-year savings of greater than 10%, and it's been sustained over a 12-year time horizon. So shared services is a sustainable way to manage costs. And I think Fack said it in his session when he said, we're always asked to do more with less. And this is very much one of those arrows in the quiver that can be used to do more with less, leverage services and shared services. And it doesn't stop with just taking transactional process. It actually evolves into more value delivery by looking at end-to-end processes, looking at multifunction processes for shared services. And that's how that continuum of savings is delivered. How large are shared service organizations? Well, they range in terms of whether they're captive or BPO, but anywhere from 250 to 1,000 FTEs generally reside within shared services. And you'll find from world-class that actually that number is slightly higher. Are they really global? Yes, absolutely. They're delivering global services. 2 out of 5 are from a single shared service entity globally as opposed to a regionally organized shared service model. So 2 and 5 have been able to drive enterprise standards. And how they are enabling the business? Well, world-class shared service organizations have cited an ability to enable the business 6 times more effectively than the average company or the pure median company. And they do that through innovative service delivery, potentially taking manufacturing activities to shared services, clearly through this particular topic, receivables management, delivering cash, cost, and working capital benefits back to the business as well. Just from a profile perspective, where are the different shared service centers? Well, there's definitely a uniqueness in region. East is east, west is west. In the west, there is a penchant for captive centers, which again is an extension of the client's operating footprint, and they place shared service processes inside a location that they own and a facility that they manage. And then a BPO is clearly when you contract with an outsourcing provider to manage those services on your behalf, and then they charge you a fee for those services. As you look really to the west, you find that North America, Western Europe, and LATAM clearly are aspiring towards more captive shared services. And where the BPOs exist and thrive, the Infosys of the world, the Wipros of the world, is clearly more towards the east in the Southeast Asia region. You see that China, India, in Northern Europe, there's a larger gravitation towards BPO usage as opposed to a captive center. So just from a size and magnitude perspective, clearly North America, Western Europe have the largest footprints, those largely being captive footprints that they use to deliver services back to the business. One example here is from World Class is how are they migrating from their existing operating environment to shared services? What's the path they're taking? How are they going about this? And are they simply lifting jobs and moving them to a lower cost market, or are they actually fixing the process and then moving it to a lower cost market? Surprisingly, from our study that we did, 2012, most companies in both peer and world class actually look to pocket the labor arbitrage advantage first. So they moved first and then transformed the process. So they literally took accounts payable as it was, and they took it offshore or they took it to a captive center so that they could back pocket the labor savings associated with translating that wage rate from a higher level to a lower level, which is interesting. But then once you've moved it, there's certainly work to be done. And I would reference Stuart Glendenning, who's the CFO at Molson Coors, who went through this very process 2.5 years ago. He spoke at a Hackett event. And one of his comments were that he took a tremendous amount of savings offshore. He was very excited about it. And then he went to visit the center, and he was walking through the center, and he noticed that the cubes that were set up, he walked into an accounts payable department, but there were 4 separate clusters. And he said, why are there 4 separate clusters of accounts payable people? Why don't we just have one? And they said, well, you do accounts payable differently in each region. So we've created a unique set of resources assigned to each process for how you execute. And he said, well, good grief. He goes, well, we need to get that down to 1. That's exactly the point, is that, you first want to pocket the savings, and then you want to transform and optimize if at all possible. So he was going to consolidate those 4 different clusters of AP resources into one by driving towards a single accounts payable or accounts receivable process. Okay? As we move on from this point, I think also there's a trajectory. So I think that had mentioned, Fack had mentioned in his speech up front as well that you certainly need to do more with less, and you need to do it in a way that doesn't compromise quality. And one of the strategies employed by CFOs has been trying to drive to world class. And in driving to world class, that's a broad spectrum of services. That's not just more of the transactional. That's also risk and compliance and information delivery for decision making. And so they have to make decisions and trade-offs every day. One way to rest comfortably, though, is that in shared services, you have the ability to know that I have a continuum and an improvement path that I can take exclusive to shared services. And I can move up a value chain that starts with complexity reduction, moves into operational excellence, and lastly arrives at business enablement. And the differences through that continuum, basically are that from a complexity reduction standpoint, you're trying to drive to a single process, like the Molson Coors example. You're trying to capitalize on a benefit. I would use a large credit card gateway that you probably have in your wallet as an example here, where the CFO basically realized that he had all of his resources in San Francisco across the full finance footprint. And he said, my costs are out of whack, they're high, I don't have shared services. So clearly the first move for him from a stage 1 function-centric perspective was moving those resources focused on accounts payable and accounts receivable to a lower cost market. And so what they've explored is the southwest of the United States as well as the central corridor as lower cost alternatives for them, where they can immediately get a return on the investment of moving people. But what was interesting in his comment is he said, I don't want to take anything more than just AR right now and AP right now. We said, well, what's the logic behind that? He said, I don't have any of the other executives on board with this idea. So he's clearly taking a functional mindset, taking his processes that he owns, and he's moving them offshore, when in fact what you should start thinking about is operational and service excellence, where you are, 37% of the companies who responded to the survey are, thinking about things on an end-to-end process basis. So thinking about the hire to retire program, where when there's a recruitment of a resource, they're coming on board. That resource needs a computer, so it's routed to IT. They need a badge, it's routed to facilities. They need to come in the door and get onboarding and training, it's back to HR. A mindset of an end-to-end process as opposed to a silo and an individual process within that silo. So purchase to pay, order to cash, account to report, hire to retire, all great examples of how companies are migrating to stage 2, which is operational excellence. And then they're now thinking about things on an end-to-end basis, realizing that upstream drivers can impact downstream effectiveness. Your ability to, from an order to cash and receivables perspective, your ability to collect from a customer could be impacted by how you take the order. Did you get all of the customer information? Did you have the product available or the service available when the client wanted it? Did you bill immediately upon drop shipping that particular product? Upstream drivers that are affecting your ability to collect downstream. So leading companies are now moving towards an operational excellence mindset. And then lastly, strategic business enablement, which not very many companies have arrived at. Procter & Gamble is a great example of this. But they've started to take more of a services mindset. And so they've said, we're going to treat our services as though we're interacting with our internal employees as customers. And we're going to communicate in time, cost, and quality measures, service level agreements. So we're going to set up a menu of services. We're going to allow you to pick those services and define what services you want us to provide to you. You determine your level of service you expect, and then we're going to tell you how well we're going to deliver it and at what cost. And so that's really more of the services mindset, of the strategic business enablement mindset. And it runs beyond simply finance. It moves into other functions. It runs beyond simply transactional. It moves into knowledge. And so the credit card processor has a ways to go, but the path before them very much follows this model in terms of how they'll continue to derive that savings benefit of greater than 10% over the 12-year horizon that we saw in the earlier